Hello and welcome to Property Development Institute on Monday the 23rd of March 2020 amid the coronavirus problems that are across the globe. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what issues we might be looking at as a property developer, and also to focus primarily on the Australian market where I'm based. And for those of you who are overseas, your market's probably doing something similar, but at least it will give you an idea of what you should be looking at in your home market. I made some notes down here below, so I'm going to go through those and talk through what I see as being some great learnings out of what we're going through and the opportunities for the future. So the first note is risk management. So one of the issues that we really have to get our heads across when we're a property developer is that of risk management. We don't know a lot of things that will happen into the future. Coronavirus, who would have seen it coming 12 months ago or even 6 months ago? Same thing if we go back to the global financial crisis of 2008, if you're old enough to have remembered that or experienced it, and then back into the 90s or back into the tech crunch about 2000, the recession that we had, particularly here in Australia in the early 1990s, and of course the share market crash of 1987. Then now we're going back a little bit too far even for someone of my age. There was a recession, I believe, in the early 80s, but no, not something that I can remember. But all these things we went through, it was disaster while we were going through it, but we all came out and grew. And over the long term, you look at that, and historically speaking, we've always been able to come out on top and keep going. But risk management is about identification of things that could possibly go wrong, mitigating them to make sure that we don't have a problem if something occurs, or an unexpected problem. And then there are the things such as coronavirus, which are the unknown unknowns. We never know when something like this is going to happen, the severity of it, and therefore in our planning we must provision for something like this happening. With our margins that we place on a project, the more detail that we go into before we commit to a project to understand what our risks may be, the better off that we'll actually be financially at the other end, whether we make more money or lose less or somewhere in between. The key thing being that managing identification of our risk issues, getting detail and information to back up what our assumptions might be or how we're planning on approaching it to mitigate that risk is very, very important. So one of the things that's happened in the last 14 months here in Sydney, Australia, is defects in buildings, where one of the a multi-storey apartment tower that had been finished for a few months started to crack, and people were evacuated on Christmas Eve of 2018. That has created all sorts of problems within our industry, which is a good problem, because what it means is that we've had to build better and reduce the amount of defects in buildings. So things of that nature are very important for us to come across. With coronavirus, one of the classic things that we need to contemplate when approaching or going into a property development project is our exit strategies. So for example, here we go, we've got the coronavirus. Who knows what it's going to do to the economy? I'm projecting that it's going to be absolutely disastrous. But from a property developer's perspective, you've got to form your own view. What I believe or what I think may be appropriate for you to listen to, but you've got to form your own view and decide, with accessing all sorts of other information as I have, to come up with my view. You need to go and find out from your own perspective in your own market what you believe is going to happen, and you make your business decisions based upon that. You cannot rely on somebody else saying, oh, what about this, what about that? I wouldn't be doing this, I wouldn't be doing that, and just doing blindly something that somebody else says. So please, this is a very big learning from this process we're going through, is forming your own view. So with the getting into a project is very easy to get into a project. You just got to acquire a site. Getting out of it's the hard part. So your exit strategy. So obviously your first exit strategy is the one where you're going to either sell your properties or lease them, whatever your development might be, and get out the way that you had first envisaged. Fantastic, great. That's blue sky. That's the perfect scenario. Then you're going to have other scenarios where we have a hiccup in the market. Might be share market goes down a little bit. Might be some conflict between a couple of countries. A Gulf War or something like that happened to me in the early 2000s when I had a property on the market and nobody was willing to make a decision about what they were going to do until after we found out what was happening with the Gulf War. So all these sorts of things are outside of our control. We need to have an exit strategy that adjusts to what might be happening. So here in coronavirus territory, how can we get out of a project? So we may have acquired a property. So hopefully, if we have settled on it and we actually are the owner, perhaps we can sit on it, rent it out and get an income to cover its cost. Or if it's slightly losing, whether or not there's any form of tax advantage in that for you, whether you've got the relevant income to be able to top up, those sorts of things come into play. You may get your approval to build the block of apartments or office tower, retail facility, shopping centre, industrial building. Again, whatever your proposed development is, get the approval for that and on-sell that approved development to somebody else who might be cashed up and able to proceed with that. Maybe bringing in a capital partner, somebody else who's got a bit of money that can help support the project to get it through. Maybe changing your residential development to a serviced apartment type building or into a hotel if hotels are permissible and obviously viable. So just because there's an alternative that might be permissible doesn't mean it's viable. So you again need to be looking at these things. So before you go into a project, it's actually good to have at least 3 exit strategies. So very important, whatever you do, whenever you're looking at a development project, always try to have 3 exit strategies lined up for the unknown. Coronavirus, again, is a classic example of this. Then we've got here acquisition opportunities as a note. So here we have a global meltdown economically, financially. It's going to change everything. But one thing we know at a fundamental level, people need somewhere to live. People will still need to go to the shops to buy food. That food will need to be distributed from industrial facilities. People still need to work somewhere, so businesses, etc., will still need office accommodation. So there's still demand for all the things that property developers create. So for you, it's now an opportunity to find sites that are in the best locations, that can be done to the size that you want to develop within your risk margin, potentially within your capital constraints. Maybe you can bring capital in from other partners. So there's a number of different things that you can do from a capital perspective, but looking at the acquisition opportunities, finding sites, now is a phenomenal time to do that. Because let's face it, let's say you were looking at a 30 unit development, so reasonable size, or even 10 units, 10 townhouses, something of that nature. Projects like that are going to take you somewhere from 18 to 24 months to complete, depending on your approvals period. What we have found, particularly in the Australian market for our overseas viewers, in Australia, the approval process to be able to commence construction, the lead up for that, from your local authority, that can take anywhere from 3 to 12 months, depending on the size of the project. There's one particular local council in Sydney that a 30 unit development might take you anywhere up to 18 months or even 2 years to get approved. So things like that, you've got to know and understand, where you're proposing to develop, what your authority approval period is. Because when you look at what's happening globally, from this economic meltdown that we're currently going through, government particularly in Australia, we're talking about sort of a 6-month recovery. In 6 months from now, if you were to acquire a property in the next couple of months, get your authority approval within, say, the next 12 months, we're well into the recovery phase. Then you can get your building work commenced and finished. By the time you're finished in, say, 2 years from now or even a little bit more, you are back in a growing economy. So demand again will have returned, and we'll get people who aren't sitting on their hands waiting for something to happen. We'll actually have some economic growth happening again. And I have a feeling at a personal level that as we come out of this, the economic growth is going to be quite substantial, because people will be wanting to get up and running and back into play in business as quickly as they possibly can. So with all of that in mind, what we're doing is we still have our 1-day 5 fundamentals of property development courses that we run, and then we do our advanced fundamentals 3 days. As far as live is concerned, given government's constraints on gatherings, we're going to be live streaming. So you are more than welcome to visit our website and see what courses that we've got on and when we're having them. Currently, because they're allocated for Sydney and Melbourne, we'll be changing all that just to be a standard 1-day or 3-day course. But you are absolutely welcome to take a look at what we've got and join us for either of those courses. All right, that's it for me for today. I wish you all the very best, and we'll be in touch in the not too distant future.